Okay, got it.
Greetings, viewers. Thank you very much for tuning in to this broadcast. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to this channel. As you can see, I've got a beautiful mountain range in the background, and the beauty of nature is second to none. We know that this is beautiful, but if you can get outside, you can connect with everything that is truly alive, then that's even better. And expand your consciousness and raise your vibe. I've got a treat for every single one of you. Uh, I've invited a gentleman along who has become a friend of mine through a mutual friend, and I've read his book, and I was very inspired by his book, and we made contact. And it was quite interesting because I do a lot of meditation and Tai Chi, as you know me. Some of you know me as a Tai Chi teacher and your Shifu or your sensei. But what John did was added something really nice to my journey. And he sent me some very powerful, insightful, thoughtful meditations. And you know, he looked at me and he said, you know, I'm going to send something to you. And he seemed to know what I needed. And it was really powerful, actually. And it gave me a sense of deeper connection. So John has written a best-selling book here, which I would highly recommend, actually. It's The Power of Letting Go. I hope you can see that. I mean, I will put links in the description. Very powerful book. And I'd listened to his podcast as well. They were very, very interesting and inspiring. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John. And perhaps if you could, John, explain the name Banahasta and how you got it, please.
Certainly, yes. Well, thanks for inviting me, Paul. So my English name is John Purkiss. For the last 2.5 years, I've had a spiritual name, which is Sri Nitya Banahastananda. And so the Banahasta part Banahasta means arrow holder. So the meaning of the name is eternally blissful form of Shiva who holds arrows to destroy the ego of oneself and others. So when I got the name, I was delighted. That fits perfectly. So I'm keen to destroy my ego, and whether or not they like it or not, I go around destroying other people's egos. And it's all for the sake of our mutual enlightenment. So that's what the name's about.
Wow, that's amazing. Very, very nice. So can I start perhaps with the question about ego? Is there any way in which we can start to dissemble that, destroy that? Is there anything that someone who has never ever practiced any mind, body, emotion, spirituality, anything like that, do at home to bring them on a similar journey?
Yeah, certainly. It's easy to get started. I think it's helpful if I describe what the ego is. So in the West is heavily influenced by the work of Sigmund Freud, which is not very long ago. And he talks about superego, ego, and id. And in Freudian psychology, the ego is useful because it stops the id from doing mad things, like having sex with everybody or robbing banks or doing very naughty things. So some people say that they have a healthy ego, or the ego is too big or too small. That's the Western view, right? The Eastern view is that ego is never helpful. And if we want to be blissful and fulfill our potential and become enlightened and have a great life, we need to get rid of our ego. And the guru who I followed for the last 9 years, who gave me my spiritual name, his name is Sri. Let me get this right. Sri Nityananda. So because he's changed his name a few times. But it's always that Nityananda bit never changes. It means eternal bliss. And when he signs up, he always says, be blissful, right? So yeah, Paramahamsa Nityananda, when I first met him. He's now Sri Nityananda Paramashivam. So what he says, he actually tells you what the ego is. And he says the ego is made up of pain patterns. So these pain patterns have many names. It could be a pain pattern or samskara or incompletion. And the principle is very simple. And Freud agreed with this. It just Freud didn't have a solution. What most psychologists seem to agree upon is that something painful happens before the age of 5, 6, 7, and that then runs your life. Hence the sort of the old psychiatrist joke about tell me about your childhood. So something bad happened in your early childhood that runs your life. The reason I latched onto, we call him Swamiji, the reason I latched onto him immediately 9 years ago was I realized he actually had a solution to this problem. And the problem is called the completion technique. And it's very simple. And most people do not do it. But the technique's incredibly simple. And it's relive to relieve. So I'll give you an example. I've worked my way all the way back to the age of probably 1. He talks about your root pattern, which is the root. If you imagine a massive tree of painful incidents, which are still with you, there's a root incident when you first felt powerless. In my case, I was probably 1. I'm crying in my cot or crib for Americans. Nobody comes. I realized this later that my dad had this philosophy that you let babies cry because it makes them stronger. And so what I relived when I was getting rid of my root pattern was I relived, I'm 1 year old, I'm crying in my cot and nobody comes. I feel completely powerless. And when you relive that intensely, what happens is the pain steadily leaves your body. So actually we could do this now, Paul, if I don't remember. That's last time. Think of the most painful incident in your case before the age of 7. You don't have to tell me what it is. Unless you want
to. I'm just having a think about it. Okay, I've got something.
Okay, how old were you?
I must have been around 5 or 6. Yeah.
Okay, that's early enough. Okay, and how did it feel? How did you feel?
I would say it felt like being rejected.
Okay, all right. Okay, and did you come to any conclusion about yourself?
Yeah, I did. I thought that I was different in some way.
Okay, all right. And when can you feel the pain of that rejection now?
I can feel a little bit of pain.
Okay, and where is it in your body?
I'd say it's around here.
Okay, there you go. I've only ever met one person who couldn't find the pain in their body, and he was a manager. He was a management consultant, so very cerebral. But basically, this pain, the point of doing this together is that the pain is stored in our bodies. It's not some abstract thing. And when you relive it intensely, it starts to leave your body.
Interesting.
Right? So to give you an example, I was with a friend last Sunday. We walk, and this technique is called completion. You're becoming whole again. You're reliving it in order to get rid of it, and then you become whole. I mean, we can do most of it ourselves. The guru has to do some of it. But anyway, last Sunday, I was in the city, and I walked past this building with a friend of mine, and I said, "Oh, look, there's a new building." She said, "Yeah, it's a new building." I said, "I worked in the building that was there before. That's where I was suicidally depressed." And she said, 26, and she said, "How come you could just say that so calmly?" And I said, "Well, I've completed it. The pain's gone now. It's just a memory, right? There was a bit there. I was suicidally depressed there. Okay, should we have a cup of tea?"
John, I listened to your podcast on that, and I was quite impressed with the fact that you can talk about that openly, because there are a lot of viewers who probably feel certain things in certain ways and are thinking, oh, it's okay to talk about that. And now, because you've experienced that, and you look like you're together now and in a better place, which is wonderful. I wish I could be like that. So I'm sure that a lot of people are thinking that I can watch some of this. I can reach out. Maybe I can get the book, or and look for where that pain is and work through it somehow.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I should mention on the subject of depression, I mean, this is the way I would describe it is, let's say a lot of people are on a 100-story building, right? And a lot of people on the ground floor or the second or the third floor, whatever. And let's say enlightenment is the 100th floor, right? Things look completely different. The weather's different, etc., etc. I would say suicidal depression is the basement.
Oh, right. Oh, I see.
Yeah, don't go there. I don't recommend it. But in my case, as an author, it was useful because I've experienced it, right? But one thing I would just say about that, I was watching a video of Swamiji's the other day, and he was talking about how people put words in you and you hold it in your inner space, and it causes massive problems. And I realized when I was 26, I went to see 3 or 4 different doctors and psychologists, and they all gave me the label of clinical depression.
Oh.
And if I were ill again, I would not cherish that word because it then triggers a whole load of stuff. I mean, you can say, look, I feel suicidal, or I feel pain, or I'm really unhappy, or whatever. Okay, so then we can work on that. But I think it's quite helpful to drop these words. I mean, I don't know if you did any Latin at school, but depression is like depression is pushing down.
Of course, yes.
It's not what we want.
Yes, but John, I mean, that's really interesting what you're saying. Is so just for the viewers, then they would tune in to that feeling and just kind of
yes. Well, we can put we can send out a video in the show notes. I mean, there are several short videos, right?
Brilliant.
But
yes.
Swamiji made it for me. But the principle is very simple. Is what a lot of us the reason we have that pain in our bodies, right? Experience was super painful, so painful that we suppressed it, so pushed it, right? If, for example, you have a traumatic experience and you live it fully, then it leaves your body, right? You just go through it. Whereas these emotional, you could call it baggage, it's stored in our bodies. What's happened is we had a very painful experience and we suppressed it, and that's why it's still there. That's why you can still find it. Okay, and when we relive to relieve, we're allowing it to come out. I mean, not everyone likes this analogy, but one analogy is you're squeezing pus out of a wound so it can heal. Actually, there's a more grotesque one which I really like. He says, so people have got this festering wound, right? All this past pain. He said, suppressing it, he says, is like putting a carpet on a wound. Which to me sounds so unhygienic.
No, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, I agree with you.
Don't put a carpet on your wound.
Please, yes, please don't do that. Viewers, I hope that you are sensible. I hope that you don't do things like that. I'm sure you don't. I have a lot of faith in you all. But John, that is amazing. I will put those links in the description. I mean, here's another one. I'm more for connecting with consciousness, raising my vibe, being the best version of myself. And as someone in the field of empowerment and wellness, I always talk about this, but I'm also a scientist. And so science taught me that all inanimate objects don't have consciousness. And then spirituality and self-help that delves into deeper aspects have taught me otherwise. And when I do my Tai Chi, I feel otherwise. But what's your view? What's your experience?
Yeah, I would say, well, they're polar opposites, right? So they're two completely different views. Someone who articulated it very well was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought transcendental meditation to the West. I did their advanced course a few years ago. And by the way, he studied physics. He worked as a physicist, and then he became a Hindu monk, right? The way he described it was what the West does. The Western philosophy is essentially materialistic. And what it says is it's philosophical materialism, not shopping. This is philosophical. And what it says is that matter is primary and consciousness is an epiphenomenon. So to put it more simply, consciousness is an electrochemical reaction produced in your brain.
I see.
And that's kind of a summary of the Western view, right? So, and that's reflected in, the latest version of how to treat depression is let's take psychedelics. Well, we, did all that in the 60s and 70s, but people are doing it again. Okay, right. So that's the Western view, right? It's matter is first, and consciousness is an epiphenomenon. It's a secondary phenomenon, and implicitly, when you die, it all just stops, right? So that's one view. The Eastern view is the opposite, or the view of the Veda. And by the way, some people turn science into a religion, but scientia just means knowledge, right? Science, scientia is knowledge in Latin, right? And Veda, which is where Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism come from, Veda also means knowledge. So one is Latin, one is Sanskrit. Okay. The difference is that knowledge gained in Western science is generally by looking outwards, looking at something in a lab, or in the sky, wherever. The Eastern knowledge, a lot of it has come from what I would call downloads. I mean, you may have experienced. I experienced loads of downloads, right?
Yeah. I mean, people, John. No, so sorry. No, I haven't as many as you, but I've experienced it recently especially over COVID, when I went much further inside. I started to experience it, and a little bit of what I don't know if you've heard of Sadhguru, and some of sessions that I've attended with him. After doing some deep work with him, I started experiencing a few more downloads and very powerful insights. So, but not as many as I would like. So, really looking forward to more of that.
Well, the more my experience is, the further I go on the spiritual path, the more it happens. And when I've observed Swamiji, as far as I can tell, he's downloading all the time, right? But as we go along this path, we experience more and more downloads. But to answer your question about the science, so what the Vedic tradition is saying is consciousness is primary and matter is secondary. So everything comes from consciousness. And we probably don't have time to do it now, but you may have heard of these Shaktis. So there are over 400 Shaktis, or yogic powers, right? And one of the fun ones, which I play around with a lot, is so it's consciousness over matter, right? So what we do, and you and I can do it sometime, is you put a coconut on someone's hand. You probably see I've got coconuts behind me.
Yes.
There you go. Is you put a coconut on someone's hand, and they can be in another country. It doesn't matter where they are. I can then move it with my third eye, right? So this is consciousness over matter, and clearly this does not fit with the classical physics that we were taught at school or university.
That is deep level stuff, Banahasta.
Well, I mean, these days, I mean, I had to go to India, but these days Swamiji initiates people over Zoom, right?
Wow.
So anyway, the reason I mentioned that is it shows you, hold it, this is consciousness that's moving this coconut around, right? It doesn't obey the rules of classical physics. So that's what I'm saying. And it's the way I look. I mean, I studied economics. The way I see physics or scientific is, they are theories. They have a certain explanatory power, but there comes a point at which there are things that they don't explain, right? There isn't a complete theory of everything in physics, right? There are very useful theories, but that's as far as they go.
Our mutual friend mentioned this, that you could do that, and she had seen it with her own eyes. So viewers, what John is saying is very powerful stuff, perhaps something that you've not heard before. And, science does not have all the answers. Though I'm a scientist, I've studied up to master's level, and we cannot dream of experiencing everything through 5 limited senses. It just does not make sense to me. Or what John is describing to me is tapping into other ways to reach out, and with the very essence of who you are. I think that is amazing, John.
Well, I really enjoy it. I mean, our mutual friend at one stage, we would be sitting in a pub and she'd say, okay, let's roll the coconut. I don't know what the other people in the pub thought about that.
Sounds like something she would say. That is amazing. I mean, see, there's so much I want to ask you. I mean, maybe one last question, John. I mean, a lot of viewers are probably a little hurt and a little damaged after the lockdowns, COVID. some are stressed, some are very much discouraged. I've seen very strong people who've not been very spiritually inclined or not done anything like this, just going to the gym, but then that was it for them. So is there anything at all that anyone can do now to just start to reconnect, perhaps in a more powerful way?
Certainly, yeah. So what I would say is the two things. One is the completion exercise, which we've just discussed. So that removes the pain. The second thing is a 6-minute video, which you can also share. It's an initiation into a technique called unclutching. Okay, so I started doing mindfulness, I think it was 1996, and then the following year, The Power of Now was published. And now I think is it 30,000 or 300,000 books about mindfulness?
Yes.
But not one. So unclutching, to answer your question, is really simple. Is a thought comes up, you sit there and a thought comes up. Now you have a choice. Do I engage with the thought or do I not engage with the thought? What most people do unconsciously is they engage with the thought. So they might feel depressed or angry or distracted or start thinking about what's for dinner, but basically they get involved with the thought. But you don't have to make that choice. You can just choose not to engage. And at first it may feel lazy or negligent or irresponsible. No, if you don't engage with the thought, what happens is life carries on remarkably smoothly.
Wow.
And enjoyably. Right. So those you can share that. I'll send you a link so you can share it. But those two techniques, completion and unclutching, just work beautifully together. Wow.
And I can vouch for that. I think it was the unclutching for me that was the missing link. And I just used, it was quite interesting. It's a short video, but I sat and I just felt that it was much longer and it had a deeper impact. Perhaps it was working at a deeper level for me. And it was something that I needed. Thank you so much, John, for joining this broadcast. It has been an absolute honor to have you here. And, please, I've read this book and, I've actually, apologies, John, I have underlined and graffitied a lot of it because I value a lot of this. And I revisit certain sections. I will only do that with books that I really value. Please get that book. It's honestly, it's a bestseller, by the way. And the
other I tell you, but I don't think I told you, the latest surprising news is it's going to be published in Hindi.
Wow.
Which I find very funny, but anyway.
That is amazing. I love it. See, this is it. And so the consciousness is working. Please do check the links in the description box, everyone. And check out the videos. There are a lot of podcasts. If you just Google search for John Purkiss, Banahasta, you will find quite a lot of his work out there, which is quite inspiring, actually. And you all stay safe, stay happy, stay well, connect, draw in as much good energy from the real world, connect outside. Now we're not locked down, we're not locked in. Please go out and connect properly. Don't watch things on the television when you can go out and be in nature and preserve the planet. Much love to every single person out there. And thanks again, John.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Stay well.